Welcome to the real story behind Snow White. You know, over the years, Disney has reimagined so many classic fairy tales into movies that we know and love. And so today, I'm going to tell you about the original story of Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. And I happen to be related to them. So out of all of the fairy tales that Disney has reimagined, their Snow White tale is very classic, and it actually is pretty similar to the original story. So Snow White starts out with her mother. She is a queen, and one day she wishes to have a beautiful daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony wood. That wish comes true later, but the mom ends up dying in childbirth. Snow White is born, and her father, the king, remarries this vain and narcissistic woman who just happens to have a magical mirror that every morning tells her that she is the fairest in all of the land. Except when Snow White turns 7 years old. Yeah, in this story, Snow White is 7. So after the magic mirror tells Snow White's stepmother that Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than herself, she decides, with pure rage and jealousy, to kill her off. But wait, whoa, tap those brakes, time out. Okay, wait, 1,000 times more? I mean, that magic mirror is a little bit harsh, don't you think? That's like comparing the Earth to the sun, or Star Trek to Star Wars. Yeah, I went there. Alright, indulge me. Just imagine, the magic mirror from the animated movie, and then slap on Simon Cowell's face. There you go. Mirror Simon. So the evil queen hires a huntsman to take Snow White out into the woods, kill her, and bring her back Snow White's liver and lungs that she can eat later. The evil queen is a cannibal. So once he brought Snow White out into the cold German woods, he becomes swayed by her beauty and innocence and lets her run off into the forest, thinking that, she would be devoured by wild animals by nightfall. And to deceive the queen, he catches a wild boar, kills it, and then takes its liver and lungs back to the queen, which she promptly eats with fava beans and a nice Chianti. Cannibal. So back out into the woods, Snow White is getting pretty beat up by just nature in general. No animals harm her. I guess you could say that Snow White ain't a nature gal. By sheer happenstance, she comes across the dwarves' cottage, where she pulls a Goldilocks. That's right, she goes in there, eats their food, drinks their water, and sleeps in their bed. Yeah, she tries out every one of the 7 and ends up sleeping in the most comfortable one. All right, time out again. In this version of the story, we aren't given any of the dwarves' names. They're just numbers. I much prefer Doc, Sneezy, Sleepy, Bashful, Happy, Grumpy, and Dopey to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the sun rises up on the next day, and Snow White and the dwarves have a deal. She can stay at their cottage if she cleans their house and prepares every meal for them by the time they get back from mining the mountains for ore. That's right, not diamonds or rubies or emeralds, but ore. Back at the castle, after a vital meal, the queen asks the magic mirror who's the fairest one of all. And then he says, Snow White. Oh, she's still alive? This makes her so infuriated that she decides to kill her herself. So instead of going straight to the poisoned apple, the queen first decides to become a rather worldly clothing saleswoman, goes up to the cottage, and offers Snow White some bodice laces. Snow White agrees, being naive, lets her in, and she puts on this bodice lace. The evil queen ties it too tight to Snow White, causing her to faint because she couldn't breathe. The dwarves come back, find Snow White unconscious on the floor, rip off the lace, and tell her, don't let strangers in this cottage. So the next day, the queen wakes up, goes to Mirror Simon, if you will, and asks who's the fairest in all the land. And guess what he says? Snow White. Well, plan A didn't work. Let's go to plan B. Poison apple? No. She gets a poisoned comb. Goes back to the cottage, this time in the guise of an old lady. Snow White lets her in and lets this strange woman start combing her hair. Once the comb touches Snow White's hair, she falls to the ground in a deep sleep. The queen thinks that she did her job, leaves. The dwarves come in, take the comb from her hair, and she's alive again. Jiminy Crickets! They tell her, do not let strangers in their cottage. The next day, the queen wakes up, goes to the mirror, and he still says that Snow White is the fairest of them all. She's still alive. So now she decides to poison the apple. Not a full apple, half an apple. Why, you ask? Because when she goes to the cottage again, Snow White is a little bit skeptical. So to prove that the apple is edible, the evil queen eats the unpoisoned half. That's enough for Snow White, so she takes one bite of the poisoned side and she drops dead. We're not talking about unconscious or, in a deep sleep. No, she's dead. As in doornail. Time out again. Where's the king in this story? Wouldn't he be worried about his 7-year-old daughter who just all of a sudden goes missing? And his wife who's cackling in the basement, dressing up in disguises, using poison, and oh yeah, eating vital organs? Whew. Anywho, back to the story. The dwarves try, but in vain, to revive Snow White, while the evil queen, back at the castle's partying like 1999. She is the fairest one of all. Congratulations. Hope you're happy, evil queen. So back with the dwarves, they decide to build a glass coffin because Snow White is just so beautiful, they cannot see her being buried in the ground. So they keep her above ground in the mountains. A prince just happens upon the glass coffin, falls immediately in love and entranced with Snow White, goes to the dwarves' cottage and asks if he could have the glass coffin with Snow White inside. The dwarves first refuse, but later they acquiesce and give him the coffin. So as the prince's servants are picking up the coffin, one manages to trip and stumble, maybe on a branch or something, causing the coffin to fall. So that fall causes the poisoned apple piece to come out of Snow White's throat, and she's alive again. She falls in love with the prince immediately, as they all do, and they decide to get married. So the wedding day comes, and the evil queen is invited. How nice of them to do that. Really. Just salt of the earth, people. When she steps into the church, she sees that Snow White is still alive. She is stunned and furious beyond belief that she can't even move, okay? While that is happening, they put these scalding hot iron shoes on her, and they make her dance until she dies. Dancing until you die. Original. That's the end, folks. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the original Brothers Grimm story of Snow White. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this one. What's the next original version of a Disney classic fairy tale that you want to hear about? Let me know in the comment sections below. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm your magical source on everything Disney, the Disney Detective. Thank you, and I'll see you next weekend.